Okay, so I'm back. My phone ran out of battery, so new location in the Red Room. So, all glory be to Jesus. What was I going to talk about? I was going to talk about the world and why it sucks. So, yeah, I want these videos to be not entirely religious because, I mean, as I've said, I was an atheist for most of my life, and so I want to talk to atheists, I guess, because it's a weird situation. A weird situation to go. It's a completely different belief system to go from I guess a scientific worldview to a believing in God worldview. It's completely different, and yeah, it's hard to comprehend. Like it's hard to make the switch. It's a very big leap, especially in the world as it is, because the world as it is extraordinarily non-Christian, non-biblical, non-God, non-Jesus, and the church is not a particularly at this stage of the game. The church is not a particularly good institution. Let's say, like it doesn't represent it doesn't represent Jesus well. I think I might have mentioned the Catholic Church in a previous video. They are quite satanic. Not all Catholics, I mean, but like the Catholic Church and a lot of the ideology that surrounds it, and it's basically the Babylonian perversion of Christianity. It's not actual Christianity. Even something as simple as, we're not supposed to make idols, and there's a good reason why you're not supposed to make idols. Because if you make an object, you end up worshiping the object rather than worshiping the Creator. And for some reason, boggles my mind as well. The religious hypocrisy, I guess. You believe in the Ten Commandments, but then you have a cross with Jesus being crucified on it, and you have that in a prominent place in your place of worship. It's like it's an idol. You're not supposed to have that. You're not supposed to be worshiping. Not that people necessarily worship it, but you're not supposed to even have it. You're making a picture of something that it's unpleasant, but it's also just it's not real. It's not Jesus. It's just a picture that you've made, of an idol. And the problem is that when the Antichrist comes, there's a good chance the Antichrist is going to look like those pictures of Jesus that everybody's there's an image that people have in their mind of who Jesus is. And if I was the Antichrist, what I would do is I'd put out a whole bunch of pictures that represent Jesus looking a particular way, and then I'd turn up looking that way. Weird. Anyway, so yeah, I wanted to talk about history a bit, sort of the Bible. I wanted to summarize the Bible and then talk about history a little bit, and then talk about the narrow path. Actually, yeah, the phone ran out of memory. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about the narrow path. And yeah, there's a few things, just a couple of notes. Narrow path, sin, groupthink. Yeah, so yeah, the church, and there's problems with the church. Like before, let's say a couple of years before I found God, He found me. I felt like there was something there. I wanted to believe, but then I would look at the church and be turned off because the church is, well, it's the traditions of man. It's not actual. It's not the truth. Jesus. You can have a personal relationship with Jesus. This is a thing that I think people who go to church for the most part don't get this. It's not just the Bible isn't just a book with morals in it. It's not just you're not just a Christian because you believe in the Ten Commandments. It's not really about that at all. It's about having a relationship with God, who is a living God, and you can have a relationship with God, as in, it's a two-way relationship. It's not just it's not just another book. It's not just an ideology. You're actually interacting with a person who is God. And you don't get this from the church, as far as I can tell. I mean, there are some people who get it, I guess, but a lot of people don't. They don't get it, and they follow the traditions of man, and they just live like everybody else. And I think there's a lot of Christians, or people who call themselves Christians, who basically they're not Christian, they're science, well, they're secular people. They have the same beliefs as scientific people, scientific rationalists, I guess you would say. They have a scientific worldview, so they think that, well, they go by science, and I understand why. I mean, it would be embarrassing. It is in some ways embarrassing. Like, I can see how it would be embarrassing to believe in the Bible literally, because it completely contradicts with science. There's so many miracles in the Bible, for example, and the creation story, obviously. And if you believe in science, you probably believe in evolution, and there's so many things where the scientific worldview is different. And I think a lot of people, they don't want to be seen as a weird person who believes in these weird, outdated ideas from this weird Middle Eastern religion. It is weird. Like, the Bible it's a very weird book from the perspective of sort of the average of society. The truth has been twisted so much that there's pretty much almost no overlap. But it doesn't make sense to be a Christian if you don't believe that the Bible is literal truth, because if you don't, again, this is probably one of the biggest things that turned me off, is you've got these people who have weird explanations for Bible, like they're trying to use science to prove the Bible. But if you believe in science, then Genesis doesn't make any sense. The creation story doesn't make any sense if you try to rationalize that as a scientific, give some scientific explanation. And even like the flood is a bit weird, and the Tower of Babel is a little bit weird. A lot of the things, there's so many miracles in the Bible. Like, it doesn't even, like the resurrection of Jesus, even really when it comes down to it. If you have a scientific worldview, like why are you believing in the scientific creation or evolution or whatever, as a Christian, but then you believe that Jesus died and did all the miracles and then was raised from the dead? Like, what's your basis for understanding reality if you're trying to mix those two schools of thought together? They don't fit. So yeah, it's weird. So I just wanted to talk about like the Bible as a history book, and then sort of talk about why the world is so messed up, and sort of what it means to walk the narrow path. And it means multiple things. I mean, it means that there's only one way to God, only one way to salvation, and that's through Jesus. You have to believe in Jesus, and you have to have His Spirit. Like, there's one way in that sense, but it means other things as well. And I think there's some things that are useful for secular people. Not that I'm recommending, like, ultimately you need to come to God. There's only one, there's one path. And if you don't, it's going to be very bad for you. But I feel like it's difficult to make a leap from, I believe in science, I believe in a secular worldview, to, all right, I'm going to completely discard my entire worldview and I'm going to believe 100% in God and take the Bible literally. Because you have to reconstruct your entire understanding of reality to do that. So, I want to give some help, I guess, some sort of stepping stones, or just like a secular understanding of some things, so that that it's not. There's good ideas in the Bible, even from a secular perspective. It's not. You don't have to believe in the supernatural elements. Like, it's not just the supernatural elements that are good. Let's say, it's not just that there is a God. It's a good thing, and He's a loving God. That's good, but that's not the only thing. But to start off, you need to have a sort of basic understanding of what the Bible is. So you start off in Genesis, and there's the creation story, and the world goes really bad. So, and when it goes bad, by the way, there's a lot of things in the Old Testament where God is killing people, or having killed a lot of people, like an entire entire tribes, or the entire world, with the flood, apart from one family, Noah and his family. And then there's other instances where a lot of people get killed by God in the Old Testament, and it comes across as very cruel, especially the way it's framed. Let's say, especially in the mainstream. But it makes sense though when you actually know what's going on, because I guess I should tell the story. So you've got the creation story, and then you've got Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, the temptation by Satan, eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then you have Cain and Abel, and anyway, there's the fallen angels. The angels come down to earth, and they have children with the women, the human women, the descendants of Adam, and they create abominations. These abominations are called Nephilim, and they're giants, some of them, and they do all sorts of things. We don't have that much information about that period of time, but what I gather is that there was a lot of genetic manipulation going on, a lot of corrupting of both people and animals, and I assume plants as well. But the reason why God wiped out the world is because the world was corrupt, and not just sort of naughty, not just doing the wrong thing, but fundamentally at a DNA level corrupt and evil, and needed to be wiped out, because it says in the Bible they had only evil in their hearts continually. So that purely evil beings, and that's why God did the flood. And these evil beings, the Nephilim, their spirits, they're different to human spirits. The offspring of the fallen angels and man, or human, I guess you would say, the women, but you know what I mean. And they're the demons that still exist today. So there's fallen angels, and then there's demons. Demons being the souls of the Nephilim. And this is the case with the some of the other tribes that, the peoples in the Bible who God wipes out. They're evil, they're corrupt. One of the interesting things, corrupt at a DNA level. One of the interesting things about doing the study of the names in the Old Testament, in Genesis, when I was going through that, is some of the names of some of the tribes are very interesting. In I can't remember what chapter it is, 13 or 14, is a war. I should probably go through this chronologically, but so there's the flood, and then after that, fairly soon after that, there's the Tower of Babel, and there's Nimrod, the first king of the world, a Babylonian king, and they built the Tower of Babel, and there's some debate as to whether or not it was a really tall tower, literally trying to reach up to the heavens, or whether it was some type of portal or something. But they intended to go to heaven, and some of them wanted to kill God, some of them wanted to just usurp God, and they had bad intentions, and so that's why God confounded the languages and split everybody up. And Babel, by the way, and Babylon, it means confusion by mixing, which I think is interesting, because it's I keep using that word, interesting. That's kind of what the Babylonian mystery religions, which are all of the religions basically today, apart from biblical Christianity, essentially have the same root when you get down to it, and it comes basically from Babylon. And again, confusion by mixing all the secret societies and all the different religions and things. It's all different ideas mixed together, and all perversions of the truth, slight variations on the truth. A million different variations. And it's interesting to know that that's what Babel means in Babylon. It's confusion by mixing. Anyway, so you got the Tower of Babel, and then basically the story. One of the things that happens early on is that there is a war between nine kings, I guess. And some of the names of some of those kings or kingdoms is quite interesting. It's I think it's the Emims, or the Terrors, and then it's the horned things. I don't think they were human. I think that some of these people were not human. And it sort of all through, or at least Genesis, there's people who aren't human. They're giants, but they're not just giants though, just genetically manipulated weird animal-human hybrids, just weird things, all these, because the fallen angels still on Earth, and the Nephilim still on Earth, so it's just weird stuff going on. Anyway, so the Genesis, it's basically the story of the beginning of the forming of Israel. You've got Abraham, who's the father of Israel, and then his son Isaac, and then Jacob. And Jacob, his name, when God changes his name to Israel, so Israel is the father of Israel. And then, he has 12 sons and or at least one daughter. And those 12 sons are the 12 tribes of Israel. And then they end up going to Egypt. Red light on here. Sorry. He ends up going to Egypt. They end up going to Egypt. All of Israel go to Egypt. And that's where Genesis ends. And then 400 years later, there's Moses and the Egyptians of... I'm getting a very brief overview here. The Egyptians have sort of subjugated the people of Israel, and so God gets them out. And there's, the Red Sea crossing, and ends up marching them around the desert for a little while. He's going to take them into their land, which is, the Canaan, or modern-day Israel. And he gives them the Ten Commandments and things, and starts teaching them the law. And they get to Israel, and this is, I guess, the first 5 books I'll talk about is the Israel from the beginning to entering into the land of Israel, the modern-day land of Israel. And so God takes them through the desert and gets them to Israel, and then they're going to go into Israel, but they send some people to have a look in, and there are giants in Israel, so they basically chicken out, and God gets angry at them and marches them around the desert for 40 years, so all that generation die off because they disobeyed him to go in, and basically didn't trust him that they could beat the giants. And the next generation comes up, then it goes into Joshua as the next book in the Bible. It's about entering into Israel and sort of the dividing up of the land between the tribes. And then there's Judges, which is Israel have over them, so until that point, I guess they were a family, and then they became a very large family, and then when they were in the desert, they had Moses who was leading them. Moses was sort of the leader, but also a prophet, and I guess also the priest, the priest being the person who was the contact between the people of Israel and God. And then when they got into the land of Israel, they wanted somebody to lead them, so a judge. So Moses was the judge of Israel. He would, if people did something wrong, they'd come to, if there was a conflict, they'd come to Moses and he would judge them on God's behalf, I suppose. And so the first phase of Israel, they had judges over them. And so the book of Judges is about that. And then the book of Ruth is sort of I think it was originally part of Judges. And it goes into Samuel, which is, Samuel and Kings, and then Chronicles, which are basically the beginning of the kings of Israel. So Saul was the first king, and then King David. And King David was the height of the kingdom. God loved David, and God was the biggest of the biggest the kingdom ever was, which is why the Jews like King David. They want the Messiah was prophesied to come from the seed of David. The Messiah is in Jesus. He was prophesied to come from the seed of David. And then his son Solomon was known as the wisest king. God was going to give him a gift, and he asked for wisdom so that he could rule over his people wisely. So God gave him wisdom and some other things as well, because he asked for the right thing, basically. And Solomon ended up having 1,000 wives, so I'm not sure if that's wise or not. But anyway, he built the temple, the first temple in Israel, and I'm skipping a lot of details here, obviously. I'm just trying to give a brief overview of what happened. Basically, after Solomon, he made some mistakes in his rule, and after Solomon, the kingdom split up into the north and the southern kingdoms. The southern kingdom was the tribe of Judah and Simeon, and I think Benjamin as well. And then there was the northern tribes. Most of the tribes of Israel became their own separate nation. So yeah, what was called Israel at the time was the northern kingdoms, and then you had the Jews, and the tribe of Judah basically was the main tribe in the south. And so then the Book of Kings and the Book of Chronicles is sort of about the two different halves of Israel, and their histories, and they had a series of kings over them, and they didn't do too well. They basically abandoned God. The northern tribe was worse than the southern tribe, and so at a certain point, they were so bad, the northern tribe, that the God let the Assyrians come in and take them out and lead them into captivity, basically. And then not, well, I think it was about 100 years or something, a bit later, that happened to the southern part, the kingdom of Judah as well. And they got taken off to Babylon. And then after a period of time there, they were brought back into the land, and they built the second temple then. So that was the second temple. And that sort of ends in the Old Testament, that sort of ends the history. Sort of, the temple's been rebuilt. But then there's some apocryphal books that I haven't read, which are about the period between then and Jesus' time. But things have gone not too well, basically, rise and fall. But the reason I give and then there was Jesus, who's the Messiah, who prophesied to come and save. But the reason I give this history is because it's sort of, there's all this debate about government nowadays. It's the governments that we have today are different to the governments in the Old Testament, but there's no real way for government to ever work. And it's it's a big topic. But the reason why this world is screwed up, all the people argue about different political systems. They're all bad. Well, not so much they're all bad. None of them can work. They can't work. And there's pros and cons to all the different systems. But the Bible shows it. But our history, even our secular history, shows that every single government eventually becomes corrupt and tyrannical, and there's just nothing you can do about it. And sort of what's happening today is inevitable. It's inevitable. I'm just looking at the time and getting close to 20 minutes. I don't think this has been a very good video. I don't think I've said that much in it. But yeah, I'm going to end this one here and see how I go.